Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Daniel Newman on the line, and he's CEO over at the Futurum Group. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Adam, thanks for having me.
All right, so excited to have you here, Daniel. And for everybody listening, this interview is part of our Milken Global Conference coverage series where we bring you the best of attendees and participants from the Milken Conference. And that's held in the Global Milken Conference in Beverly Hills, California. And Daniel, just to get us kicked off here, I understand you participated in the conference and you were a speaker. Is that right, on a panel?
Yeah, so it was actually first time. I've been a long-time follower of the event.
Hold on. First time and you got to get on stage, man? How does that happen? Who do you know?
We'll talk about that. I happen to know a few people. I think
awesome.
We're in this perfect confluence of AI and economies and geopolitics, and of course, my specialty is technology. And there's a lot of interest in that right now, but it was a great conference. I mean, just such a good opportunity to hear it. And it was such an important moment. It was when the tariff situation was peaking and seeing Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and some great voices to bring some calm and some sensibility. A great event. I look forward to speaking at it again. I led a conversation about the future of AI and data centers.
That's awesome. For those that couldn't attend, let's go a little bit further along those lines. So tell us a little bit more about the conversation you led.
Yeah, so I was asked to host what was kind of an intimate boardroom session, and it was about 35 to 40 capital allocators. So it was banks and hedge funds and investors in the room. And we were really having a conversation about sort of what was going to drive this massive wave. I think some people hear about this AI infrastructure investment. You hear numbers like $300, $400 billion over the next year that's going to be spent to build the future. I call it the cities of the future for running these AI systems. And so it was really a perfect moment to kind of hear from those that are investing, those that were building. I had a panelist that was a CEO of a company that builds global data centers, and sort of bringing it together. And one of the great things that came out of that conversation, Adam, is it really reinvigorated my confidence that this technological wave really can't be stopped, even with some of the macro and geopolitical concerns we have right now. And of course, since then, we've had beyond tariffs, we've had the bond market collapsing, we've had potential wars in the Middle East and continued wars in Europe. But AI is such an important secular trend that there's more dollars chasing opportunities than there are opportunities. And it was a really positive experience. And of course, the folks at Milken, such a great conference, so well organized, very secure, and of course, lovely location.
Yeah, great feedback. And switching it up a bit here, let's get into more of the topic. So managing and inspiring change in the AI revolution area. I mean, you're at the forefront of this, especially with your work. What kind of obstacles are you seeing maybe that didn't even exist, say, as little as 5 years ago? Like, what kind of obstacles are you seeing?
Well, you heard me talk about this incredible insatiable appetite to invest in AI. Well, 5 years ago, AI was a thing 40 years ago, but it was sort of one of those things that was very much slow at first and then all at once. I mean, nobody had played with the chat GPT. For some of us, we were still really figuring out how to optimize search.
Yeah.
We were using business applications like SAP and Oracle and Salesforce, and all those things are still around, but the pace that we are going to see markets disrupted because of these generative AI and agentic AI, they're basically coming for every part of our industry, and it's happening so quickly. So I have written 7 books, and you called that out earlier, and I wrote a book called Future Proof. And then my most recent book was called Human Machine. And what I focused on in these books was kind of the speed of transformation that we are going through with each revolution, whether it was the printing press, the radio, the television, the internet, and now AI. And I mean, there was some in between there. But we used to have decades, between these revolutions. And then we had years between these revolutions. And now I think what leaders are facing is it doesn't feel like you have days. Every day you have a new model, something new coming out that's like, is this existential to my business? Do I have to run and do AI today? And it feels the pressure is incredible. And of course, this 24/7, 365 connected world that we live in, whether you're a business owner or you're an employee, there's just this unbelievable pressure that you can never put down business, which makes it really hard to have balance in life. It's exciting as an entrepreneur, but it's difficult, to find health and balance and family and all those other things. And I think a lot of that didn't exist, decades ago. And even 5 years ago, you just see how much this is kind of creeping into our lives, and it's just pervasive.
Mm. Now, in your work, you're working with top CEOs, and so you have a unique vantage point, and you're in different rooms, whether it's the Milken one that you just mentioned a moment ago, where you led a discussion, or just in your day-to-day work. Like, what's keeping the CEOs of the world up at night? Like, what's their current state of mind?
Yeah, the work we do at Futurum, it's such a great gig. I talk to, anywhere from 100 to 150, large cap and mid cap technology CEOs every quarter. So I have the chance to really understand what's going on in these companies. And of course, they're always juggling kind of the news cycle, meaning what's the thing of the moment. In the beginning of the year, we talked about milk, and I was in Davos. Same thing, and there was so much positivity. The election had happened, and of course, there's a lot of various sides of opinion about President Trump, but the overall business or collective all really thought there would be a lot of deregulation. There'd be a lot of opportunity for M&A. We'd see more IPOs. There was a lot of enthusiasm, maybe is the right word. And it was funny because it was like getting smashed by a freight train in April on Liberation Day. And so you see how that cycle, like everyone's coming into it. Everyone was ready to make these big investments and adopt AI. They were going to build this efficiency machine. They were going to go out and acquire companies, and they were going to take their companies public, and they were going to do all kinds of partnerships and global expansion. And then the tariffs came. And a little bit like what we talked about in just your last question about kind of what we're facing, we haven't faced years ago, this cycle of how quickly things can happen but this next thing came. And it was like it stopped business in its tracks. Nobody knew what was going to happen. They didn't know if they were going to have to completely rebuild their supply chains. They didn't know if they were going to have to start thinking about cutting workforce to reduce expenses. And so there was so much uncertainty that CEOs were really sort of paused. And that was something I hadn't seen. Even in the last several years, even during COVID, it was about as bad as that kind of moment when we started shutting down because of what was going on. Yeah. And what was most amazing about it, Adam, and maybe the most encouraging and positive part of this story is in less than 2 weeks, these same CEOs were really starting to find their bearings. That's how fast information proliferates. That's how fast they were able to start sort of seeing the pattern, the sort of, I call it the escalate, de-escalate strategy of this administration, how they would say, we're going to do 1,000% tariffs. And then it's like, no tariffs. And it was 500%. And then everybody in the end kind of started to come to realize, like, we're probably going to end up somewhere, but President Trump doesn't want to stop the economy. And you started to see more positivity. Now, even today, as we have this conversation, there's still some uncertainty about what's going to happen. But these CEOs, just like I'm dealing with, are finding more and more that, they have to be able to juggle kind of this constant news cycle. Yeah. Every day sort of lever up and lever down as to whether or not things are going to go crazy and something's going to get tweeted that changes the whole economic direction. Yeah. But at the same time, like, I think we sort of find balance in chaos. And that's one thing CEOs do incredibly well. It's the contextual shifting. It's the ability to bounce from ups and downs, highs and lows, certainty and uncertainty, and then being able to steady your ship, whether you're running a 50,000 person company or, you're a 5-person organization. And because of AI nowadays, you can still be $1 billion company or more either way. Yeah. And is there, in terms of the CEOs, because you're talking to, 6 to 8 Fortune 100 CEOs on a weekly basis, so that's a significant access point. Is there, in all of this that you mentioned, are there some silver linings, like in the views, or like some benefits here? Well, first of all, it's just personally for growth. These are some of the most intelligent and thoughtful people on the planet. So, yes, of course. But in terms of, generally speaking, these CEOs are incredibly optimistic. And despite the fact that, again, they're dealing with this kind of wave of, certainty and uncertainty, I think anyone that's ever been through, like I always say, real leadership, real relationships, they tend to be born in the trenches. And so most great CEOs have risen up. It's never been a straight line. It's been a lot of those kind of peaks and valleys. They've seen economic turmoil. If you've been in the business world for less than a couple of decades, you've seen the internet boom and bust. You saw 9/11. You saw 2008 and the housing collapse. we had some serious slowdowns in the next decade. It was a little bit of a lost decade, if you remember, for the markets and the S&P. And then, of course, so we had COVID. We've had the chaos of elections. We've had a shutdown, stay at home from work, which also had all kinds of policy changes, how companies were running. We went through kind of this period of time of different social norms. And again, some seemed like they were great for developing some growth as human beings. Some, we've seen it reverted to the mean from the last 5 years, certain policies around sustainability and diversity. You've seen companies walk some of them back. But as CEOs, you've been through every one of these gyrations.
Yeah, sure.
And you've survived. Yeah. And many of them, have seen their earnings grow. They've seen their companies grow. They've individually grown. And so they've kind of, like William Wallace, like Braveheart, they're standing at the end with their sword in the air. And that sort of strength, I think, begets more strength. And it creates, really, really good leadership. And, I learned so much from these people. And of course, we all have up and down days, and so do they. But I mean, overall, most of these people that I'm talking to are leading organizations with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of employees. And every day they get up and they find the way to navigate through the chaos and lead their companies with a steady hand. And there's so much to learn from that. And of course, there's so much to learn from all of their failures, all of their adversity. They really do tend to collectively treat it as lessons learned that delivers growth in what they do. And again, they're not perfect. They're not superhumans. They are normal people. They get up like you and me. They put their socks on and their pants on a leg at a time, but they really do display some just tremendous character traits. And I'm just so blessed to be in that they listen to me and that they heed advice from me. And I learned so much from them.
Now, you, as you mentioned earlier, 7 books under your belt now, so I'm going to call that a content catalog or a library of books. What fuels your creativity here in writing the books and putting out this content?
It also, without going too far into histrionics, it really started with my very first book, and maybe I'll kind of hit the beginning and the end. My first one was called The Millennial CEO. So I'm a very old millennial, born in the early 80s. And I became CEO for the first time when I was in my late 20s. And I was running a company with a few hundred employees, that I was brought in. It was a really complex company. It had 5 families that owned it. There was no controlling ownership. And they brought me in. And it was just one of the most incredibly difficult jobs I ever did. And I started blogging about my experience. And it ended up becoming a really popular blog called Millennial CEO. And it ended up getting an opportunity to write a book about it. And so it kind of got me into this whole, sort of journaling almost, which my journaling, instead of journaling, without sort of a real purpose and direction, it actually, my career sort of became this creative off ramp to write. And then as I started to move from more writing about leadership to writing about technology, my 2 passions, the book sort of evolved to books that really looked at digital transformation, AI, and the future. And so as a CEO of a company that provides market research, data intelligence, and media to the technology industry, the books are really a way to put an exclamation point on all the research and all the CEOs and all the access that I have. Creates a little bit of a future vision for what the world looks like. So I wrote the book Human Machine over 5 years ago, along with my co-author, Olivier Blanchard. And, we wrote the book Human Machine when people weren't even talking about human machines. We saw this coming together and this fusion of technology and people and autonomy. And a lot of the purpose of the book was to really provide a certain calming effect that, hey, yes, there will be robots, there will be cars that drive themselves, there will be tools, technologies, and applications that do the work, the mundane work we do today, and write code for us and write articles. And heck, at some point, it probably will start to read our mind because that's just how much data it has to better understand us. But at the same time, there's been this really prolific growth that we've had as a society with each industrial revolution has come growth, productivity growth, job growth, human expansion and capacity of our individual contributions to society. And so it's a great off-ramp. I mean, I do a lot of shorter form. I write a lot of shorter content. I love to be on social media. And I haven't written a book since the end of the last decade. So I'm probably due for one, Adam. But
Yeah, I
at
was
the same
about
time,
to say, man, what, you're getting lazy on us,
I'm getting
Daniel?
lazy.
Come on, man.
I'm running.
What's going on?
Sure, the amalgamation of more than 7
You're
companies.
busy working with all these CEOs. You ain't got time for his book.
I'm working, but the book in the end, the manifesto, whatever it ends up being, it'll be very interesting when I can really sit down again. And I'm hoping.
I have
I'm 44.
zero doubt on that. I'm absolutely certain it will be. That's amazing, and I gotta, do my part to light that fire. No.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm gonna start writing it tonight.
And you heard now, Mission Matters audience. See, we're making things happen on the pod. No. Oh, Daniel, man, I've really enjoyed this conversation and learning more about you, your work, and also your viewpoints on what's going on. I think it's very helpful for me as a learner and then for my audience as well. That being said, if somebody's listening or watching this and if they want to learn more about the Futurum Group or your books or anything else you're working on, how do people connect? How do they follow up?
Yeah, very easy. If you want to learn more about Futurum Group, it's www.futurum, Futurum group.com. And then, of course, I am prolific on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I really don't leave any mystery as to what I'm thinking. So if you like tech, markets, economics, and a little bit of sarcasm, join me there. It's at Daniel Newman, UV at the end. So Daniel, Newman, UV. Have a lot of fun there. So that's 2 great ways to get to know me and say hi. I am an introvert. I don't necessarily like small talk, but I love big ideas. So feel free to say hi.
Awesome. And for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put some links in the show notes so you can just click on them and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration that helps you along the way in your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Daniel, man, appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.